Hi, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Curio, where we get curious about the different topics of money and how they impact our lives. I'm Liz Gillette, founder and senior financial advisor at Curio Wealth, and I'm joined by my colleague, Stefan Revelo. And here today, we are going to talk about how money matters impact couples. So, our plan to explore a few topics here. We want to talk about how we handle these matters in our own lives. We want to talk about what it's like to be in meetings when we're working with couples. And we want to share some of the challenges and best practices that we see.
So, all right, guys, it's that time. Things are getting a little serious. You're starting to meet each other's parents, and it's time to have the talk. And yes, we are talking money. So get your head out of the gutter there. So today we're going to be diving deeper into how couples handle finances. And usually the most common question is, do we have joint accounts? Do we have combined accounts? How do we handle that? So Liz, I'm going to start off just point blank asking you off the bat, how do you and your husband handle finances in your house?
Yeah, great question. So we have joint bank accounts. That's something that we did actually right after we got married. It was one of the first things we did, go down to the bank and get joint bank accounts. We have all of our shared expenses flow into there, even though we have different timing coming in of our income and different bonus structures and all of that. So we do shared expenses. We have shared goals. I run financial plans for us to review. And we get together on a quarterly basis to see how we're tracking towards the goals that we have as a family.
Awesome, awesome. And so I also know you're a mother of three. So even though we are talking about finances, I'm just curious, just in the house, are you and your husband, you guys talking about money in front of the kids? Are you guys exposing them? I know they're all very young, but just curious how you guys handle that just with the rest of the family.
Yeah. So my oldest is 7, just had her 7th birthday. And she has been hearing about chore charts and everything in her school. So she's been asking to have chores. And someone taught her about allowance because she's been asking a lot more, which chores do I get paid allowance for? But when she was 5, we walked her through an exercise. Her name's Bailey. And I wanted to teach her a little bit about the connection between getting the things that you want and needing money to get those things, right? Money doesn't grow on trees, that kind of thing. So what we did was we got 5 $1 bills and we took Bailey to the dollar store. And we explained to her that everything costs $1. And before you yell at me about the taxes, I know, it just was a little much to teach a 5-year-old about Maryland sales tax. So yes, mom and dad paid the tax, but we gave her 5 $1 bills and we told her to pick out 5 things that she wanted. We filmed this. It was pretty entertaining. She picked out about 70 to 75 things. She definitely was having trouble narrowing them down. Her entire cart was full. And then she would say, but I only have 5 monies. And we're like, yeah, you only have 5. So she'd pull it out. Our only rule was that we cannot say no to anything unless it's inappropriate. If she literally picks out a pregnancy test, like something that a 5-year-old should not have. Luckily, she did not. So we had to say yes, whether it was treats or candy or anything like that. So she went through, she pulled things out. At one point, she got a congrats grad balloon, but she couldn't spell. So all she knew was that it was a balloon. She did end up getting her brother 2 items. And in the end, she pulled out enough things till she realized that she only had enough money for 5. And so she went to check out and she got her 5 things, went home, gave away, the gifts and everything that she had. We talked to her about it. Does this make sense? You only have $5. So the worst part about this is it felt like everything was going smoothly. And then, 2 days later, we're at Target and me and Brandon, my husband, were like, wow, we nailed that. She's definitely going to understand the value of $1. And we go to Target and no change in the behavior. It's still can I have that? What about that? Oh, that looks good. And we're like, we just taught you, so I can't say that it's stuck. I didn't figure out any miracle parenting advice there. But now that she's 7, she started her own company last year at 6 and had a summer job, selling lemonade and doing all sorts of things. So it is fun. It's fun to incorporate it with the kids, and just teach them that mom and dad are going to work and it's through work that we get our money. And then that's how we're able to, have food for the family. That sort of thing.
Oh, man, that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's awesome, especially great. And obviously we work in the world of money and this is something that we talk about all the time. But money is taboo with kids, even with couples. I know oftentimes that can be a point of contention, and both people wanting their independence and both parties working hard for their money, and they think they should be able to spend it the way they always have. But it's kind of important as you grow your family, as you incorporate other people, that everyone is being accounted for and heard. It's no longer just you. The minute you go from single to being a couple, your approach should be different because the situation is very different. So I think it's great that just in your household, you guys are facilitating these conversations, especially early on with your kids.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's an interesting one because we're so comfortable talking about it. I can't help but wonder the impact it's going to have on them. Now, let me ask you, like in your world, you're on the other side of the coin. You're in the dating world and you have to decide when's the right time to bring this up, with someone in your life, and how do your values align with them? So, yeah, tell me a little bit about what's happening with money on your end as it relates to seeking out a partner. Right?
Yeah, I'll try to leave my dating traumas out of this, but from a money standpoint, it's actually pretty interesting. So I'm 25, single male living in Chicago. So that's where I currently reside. And it's pretty interesting, at least with me. So usually if I am going like on a date with someone or I'm meeting someone for the first time, they usually have seen my Instagram and social media accounts before. That's oftentimes how we can connect prior to meeting. And on my social media platforms, I talk a lot about money, not in a flexy way or anything like that, just strictly educational content, what to think about, and just try to help people, just how we do at work. I just kind of do that on my free time and post about it. So whenever people see that coming in, like they're expecting me to be talking about money and like right off the bat kind of do that. I think I do a decent job of like staying away from that and not it be my whole identity and that's like the only thing I'm presenting. But usually they already know that I care about money. They know what I do, at least as a career, usually before that. So I don't know if they're anticipating me to talk about it. But usually the conversation does come up pretty early. I mean, on first, second dates, I have talked money. And I think it's a little different in today's world where people are just way more open to talking about it. I know kind of, let's say when my parents were coming to the dating world, you definitely did not talk about money, especially early on. It was just more about the connection. And I don't know if it's with social media or just things that are out there now in public, but people are way more receptive to having that conversation. So usually how I go with that conversation is how much they're giving me to work with, right? So if they're going super deep and super personal, I mean, I have no problem sharing my situation and my relationship with money. In terms of like how much we make, again, I have been on situations where they're telling me I make X amount. So I'm like, oh, well, I can't just hold back my number now. I probably should share. So there have been points where we're even talking about how much we make, which again, for older generations, I know my dad, he thinks that's really weird. And he's always like, don't talk about that kind of stuff. That's not that place. But I just think now with my friends and just with people that I see out in public, just in my age range, people are actually having a lot more receptiveness to that conversation. And I think it's great. I mean, I think you can't get good at anything without talking about it. So I think money is something that most people struggle with in the US. So if people are more willing to have those conversations, I think everybody is just kind of better off there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Tell me how often are you splitting? I know what you offer because I know you, but how often are the women that you're with like want to split the first check versus want to pay for it? But yeah, like I feel like I have a guess, but again, I'm out of the dating world. So I got to know.
So you'd be surprised. So luckily, I mean, I guess I've just been around good people and been going out. So usually they're very open to splitting it. Now, my dad would probably disown me if I ever allowed a girl to pay on the first date. He raised me to be a gentleman and the men should pay. So that's kind of that's the upbringing I had. So, and actually a trick that I do, which I think is a little bit unorthodox, is I take care of the bill when so if we're sitting and the dinner's wrapping up or we're out for some drinks or whatever, I'll go to the bathroom or I'll leave elsewhere and I don't even want to deal with the awkwardness of the check. it's there, and then we're both looking, and she's like, "Oh, I'll pay," and pulling out a card, and just to avoid that whole mess. I try to take care of it, and I'll get there a little sooner than the date, and I'll tell the server, whoever's with it, I'm like, I'll tell them the situation and be like, I'd rather not deal with it, and you bring the check, and so I'll find you, and we'll take care of that. So that's kind of my approach to avoid that situation. But I mean, percentage-wise, again, it's been 80% plus of the woman being very willing. And I think that also just depends on demographic and where you're at in the country. I'm from Florida. People in Chicago are nicer than Florida. So I think you find a little more in Florida. You wouldn't get that as much. But here in the nice Midwest, I've definitely, I hadn't had anyone like just expecting me to pay, or it's been a pretty good, they've always at least offered it up, which I'll never take it, especially on the first day, but it is nice. And I do appreciate when they're willing to kind of step out and do that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like how you're already saying controversial statements and we're like 10 minutes in and you're already saying that Florida isn't nearly as nice. So, all right, that'll be like the tagline for today's episode. Now, people probably don't know that you and I work together on a certain client base, right? We tend to work with people that are at the earlier to mid stage of their careers. So generally call it 30s and 40s. And when we work with couples, you and I have seen some like pretty consistent themes that come up. I know we have preferences and how we work with couples, the roles that they both play. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about, what those meetings look like and how we work with our clients. And then if you leave anything out, I'll add my 2 cents.
Yeah, awesome. So a lot of the clients that we work with are kind of literally exactly the stage of life that you're in, kind of in their early 30s, maybe even late 20s, up to age 50 years old, maybe a little above that. And they're coming in with young children. They're coming in with a bunch of goals. They're coming in they're trying to get organized. And so those times when you have young kids, the importance of figuring out your finances early on while you're in that kind of messy middle is super important. So I just want to give a little context of kind of the people that we work with. And then our conversations with the clients is really interesting. So obviously, Liz, you've been doing this a lot longer than me. And it was I can recall meetings where there were sometimes contention between the spouses, and we're kind of in the middle, and they're looking for us as the answer. They'll bicker a little bit and be like, "So guys, who's right?" And there's never a who's right and who's wrong. Everything's about context. Everything is about compromise and kind of trying to meet in the middle. And I think that's one thing that you do very well, is making sure that both parties are always heard. So usually in most households, there's usually what we call a CFO. This doesn't necessarily mean the breadwinner. It has nothing to do with that. It's just someone who has a better sense of the finances. That's just typically speaking, one spouse is more engaged into the overall situation. Both people should know what's going on at all times, but naturally, I'm sure in your house, you kind of lead the finances, being a financial planner. So I know the first thing that we try to do is just to make sure that both people are always heard. Usually in our conversation, one spouse is kind of giving us all the context of what's going on. This is how much we make. This is the situation we're dealing with. And it could feel a little bit one-sided sometimes, or one person kind of giving us most of the context. So we always try to, if the spouse is sitting next to them, again, male or female, we've seen both situations. And it's making sure if they're quiet, we'll kind of stop our meeting and kind of say, hey, we'll check in with them. How are you feeling? Is everything that was shared accurate? Or if we're talking, if we're having a values conversation, do you feel aligned with what the other person is sharing? But we just try to make sure that both people are being heard, and try to realize that this is one household. This is one team. So it's not your money, my money. This is our money. How are we going to build our family, our future? So just kind of help couples come together and form a team rather than two separate entities like we were before.
Yeah. God, that was so well said. I guess I have a few small things to add, but you described it perfectly. I think it's just for couples to know that they never come in with the exact same goals, the exact same risk tolerance, the exact same knowledge of financial markets. Typically, if they're, like most households and you're delegating, to your point, maybe one person pays the bills, but the other one makes more money, as an example, or something in between. So yeah, I think we both love the challenge, the challenge of getting two people, and our job is to facilitate. Our job is to like guide people, facilitate discussions. And I don't know whether, I can't remember if Jim and Jake touched on it, but we went through that motivational interviewing training. It's a huge component of what we do. We're meeting every other month at our firm, and we're getting this training that just reminds us, how do you help people make decisions? And it's so tempting. If we're financial planners, we are fixers. We like giving people answers, having the solutions, making it efficient, getting it done all in one shot. And so we're really challenging ourselves as a team. Every single one of our teammates, regardless of the role at Curio, is going through this motivational interviewing. And it allows us to hear a client's perspective, bounce it off the other person, and not jump right to a solution. And I think that has been the biggest thing for me with our couples, is in recognizing, and thank you for saying that they both feel heard. That means everything to me. That's how I want my couples to feel. And I really like to be an advocate for sharing responsibilities as well. It's really easy to go to that CFO and say, hey, here's your 5 to-dos. Let's just put it back on the CFO. It's like, that's a great opportunity to get people involved. I know you and I came to the most interesting conclusion. We love to meet with our couples together and see their dynamic and make sure we engage both of them. But Stefan, you have to tell them, like you told me after one of our meetings where, the spouse was a little bit late. They were about 5 to 10 minutes late signing on to the meeting. And you guys, Stefan turned to me and he said, have you noticed this theme? And I'll tell you, I had not put 2 and 2 together. And it was like, you opened my eyes for the first time. So please, yeah, I guess I'll tee up for that. Tell them about what we learned when you get a few moments with one spouse or one partner by themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny because I'm new in this kind of career, so every conversation, I feel like I remember all of them. It kind of sticks to my head, and I haven't had enough for them to kind of fall out. But I do remember this instance where we had the husband came onto the call first. So we had that individual, and we were waiting for the wife to join. And I'm not calling that. I guess I'm kind of calling out the male species, but kind of men in a general, we tend to be, I don't know if it's overconfident or we want to come off that we know what we're doing. So oftentimes this individual on this call, he's always very kind of calm, cool, collected. When it's both the spouse, when he's on the call with his wife, everything seems to be going very well. He's just asking questions. Well, what can we do better? Just asking kind of a normal meeting. And I remember this was the second time I was meeting this couple. And when the husband joined at first, it was a different energy. He came into the call and was like, he was leaned in and was like, Liz, Stefan, like, I don't know what we're doing here. Like and just like being way more raw and way more vulnerable, I think is the word I would like to use. It was just a different side I hadn't seen. He was always, just felt very confident with what they were doing, kind of making sure his wife wasn't worried about anything. If she was worried, he would try to be kind of help her kind of come down a little bit. But in this situation, it was the total opposite. They were nervous. I don't know what we're doing. Are we doing the right things? We want to make we're making good money. We think we're doing the right things, but we just want to be sure that our kids are going to be we can pay for our kids' college and go on nice vacations. And it was just a different level of urgency and a different level of just willing to accept that they don't have the answers. And I just found it fascinating how, and there was I remember there's 2 different instances where that happened with another couple. And I don't know if it's just they don't want their other partner to feel that they're worried, or they want them to know that everything is going okay. And all of our clients are amazing savers. They're all in a very good place. Like the things that they were bringing up, they were not going to not retire. Like they're in a very good situation. But even when you're doing well financially, you still have stresses. You still have worries. You still have uncertainties. So it was just very interesting to see when one of the spouses was by themselves, how they came across or felt more vulnerable and more just, I don't have it all, rather than when both of them are on and everything seems to be all peachy and all great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fascinating. I feel like if I had to guess, my 2 cents would be that every couple has their own dynamic of the things that they soothe each other with and help each other with. And they carry the torch in one area and the other one carries it in a different area. So I noticed that in both scenarios, it was the CFO who was the one being vulnerable and saying, I don't got this, and it just was so fascinating for them to know that they go into that meeting. They were the one who hired us, right? They were the one who said, let's have a financial advisor. But it's important with their spouse and with their relationship to maintain, it's not even a facade, because to your point, it's not like things are crumbling, but to maintain that image of like, we 100% got this. And then when we had the time alone with him, it was so impactful that Stefan and I have a plan that throughout 2024, we are going to find ways to get 15 minutes with this person and then 15 minutes as well as having meetings together. Like that's how impactful it was, is that again, at our firm, we really try to constantly reevaluate and get curious and decide how we can do things better. And that was our biggest takeaway, is like, well, gosh darn, how are we going to get these people like independent so that they can really be their true authentic selves? So yeah, that was, to me, that was one of the most interesting takeaways, because every couple has their challenges, right? And we see some themes. We see some consistent themes from couples coming in of what their challenges are. And I would say you and I have kind of come up with our own best practices, per se, of some areas that we can help them. Oh, we've heard that before. This is what we've found. And we like to be open. Sometimes that client finds a solution, shares it with us. And then we have an ability to say, hey, our other client had success doing X, Y, Z. So you want to tell our audience a little bit about, some of those challenges we consistently see with our client base?
Yeah. So I know one big one, and again, this is kind of the hot terms, but saver spender. So that kind of conversation. And to be clear, I don't think anything like that is point blank. Is that one person is a saver, the other one's a spender. It's all nuance. We're savers in situations, we're spenders in others. I spend money in ways that other people might find dumb or be like, why would you spend money on that? And then vice versa. People spend their money. I was like, I would never spend that much on clothes, but at a sporting event, I'll gladly spend hundreds of dollars and not care and buy $10 beverages and whatever the case may be. So I think, so that big context or that conversation of, that oftentimes can cause friction in a within a household, where one person feels like they're kind of doing all the things they need to do, they're living above their means, and the other spouse may be kind of not checking the price tag when they buy things and just kind of being a free spirit of feeling a little free with spending. I think a common thing, and this is not really in the context of clients, I just think it's in just things I've seen with friends and family, where it's funny when one person thinks one's the saver and they're kind of accusing each other of being the spender. It can come in different ways, right? Like one person can spend like death by 1,000 cuts, where they're kind of spending $50 here, $20 there, Amazon packages, again, like doing just little things that consistently add up. And the other spouse can be like, oh, why are you always spending money every day? You're swiping the card. And the other person might not be making many purchases, but they make one $4,000 purchase. It's like, all right, well, everything I did, you just spent $4,000 on a home surround sound or whatever the case may be, golf clubs or whatever the case may be. But I think it's interesting how it can come in different ways. It can come from just a lot of little things with spending, or it could be kind of a few bigger purchases. So it's like, which one's right, which one's wrong? Again, that's not for us to decide. But just to piggyback on kind of that concept, do you have any guidelines, or kind of how have you seen with like when to consult your partner? So obviously you should have the ability to spend your own money, but again, this is our money now. So how have you navigated it at home or with clients of when do you need to go to your partner to sign off on a certain purchase, and what if that's a dollar amount, or if that's just a conversation before you pull the trigger? Just kind of what's been your experience, or what you've seen with that?
Yeah, when it comes to your spending, it tends that about 75% of our spending that any of us do on a monthly basis, those decisions were actually already made. And what I mean by that is those tend to be our fixed expenses, like your mortgage or your rent of where you live. In my case, the daycare that you pay for your kids, or maybe the school or private school, how much you pay for your utilities, right? For whether you have cable and whether you have these different TV packages, on how much you got for the cost of your insurance. Like those decisions were actually already made. So one of the biggest things I talk to people is spending about is focus in on that 25 to 30% that changes from month to month, right? For like the eating out at dining out at restaurants and the amount you spend on entertainment, seeing friends, traveling, like that's the amount that you should focus in on, because that's the one that we see a lot of variation in. So what I find is that if couples come up with like a general spending amount, even if it's broad for that category, for like our free spending that we can do in those one-off categories, have a general idea of what you want that to look like on a monthly basis, then sit down and say, hey, last month, you could throw a number out there to make it a little bit easier. You know, we said we could do $2,000 when it comes to groceries and travel and friends and all of this. And we were at 3,000. We'll look at it as a couple. Maybe you prepaid for a trip. So it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. And we'll have to rein it in on a different month. So what we do in our household and what I recommend to clients is having that bigger vision in place, because no one wants to feel handcuffed by their finances. Like the problem is, regardless of where anyone is at in a financial state, I've yet to meet anyone that says like, I like feeling restricted. I like having conversations about $5 lattes. Like, no, absolutely not. So what you want with your spouse is you want a trigger amount, or your partner. I'm sorry, I don't mean to say just spouse. So you want a trigger amount to say, hey, if one of us is going to make a purchase over X amount of dollars, $300 for some people's household, there's got to be a conversation, right? And then as long as you have that number in play, then you have a bigger budget and you say, hey, we agreed together that we're not going to go over this amount. And thank God for tech. Tech can show us how much we're spending, you know, by the minute on your phone. You can have an app in there saying, this is where you are in your February budget. But then you should have this number that's basically, let me consult my person and make sure they're on the same page. Because it kind of gets into the conversation about joint bank accounts and, you know, individual bank accounts. And my whole take there is I just want you having a conversation about it. I've seen really successful couples with separate bank accounts that say like, I like it, I like the freedom, but my God, they get together with us, they get together on a monthly basis, they know they have shared goals and that works for them. I've also had couples with joint bank accounts and the second partner doesn't even know how to log in. Like, so what's the point, right? They look like joint on paper, but there's one person dominating all of it. So I just want you to respect what your partner is doing and what your partner is buying. And if there is a disconnect there, force yourselves to have a conversation. But yeah, some kind of trigger amount can be really helpful to know, hey, am I allowed to pull the trigger? Do I have free reign here? Or do I need to like stop and consult you, you know, with your permission?
Yeah, I like that. I like the trigger amount. And that's not to be where it's you need the other person's approval. That's not what kind of that's not what we're trying to get at. It's kind of more just keeping the line of communication, especially if it's not joint accounts. Like that's where these conversations are even way more important. And again, you're not trying to get approval. You don't want to feel like, oh, I have to ask my partner if I can make the basic life decision, or if I need to buy grocery. Like I shouldn't need to do that. So it's kind of more on those leisure things. And it's just more on just making sure we're on the same page, and just so that one person's not blindsided of like, oh, wow, like, where did this extra expense come from? So it's just more of a transparency thing rather than you're trying to control your partner. That's not at all what we would advocate and try to conduct in our own lives. So I think that's important kind of context just to have in place there.
Yeah, for sure. And staying power in your relationship. Like if you want that staying power, you just need to have that transparency and avoid that financial infidelity that can come from different areas of, oh, I was going to tell you. I mean, that kind of stuff really gets under people's skin because, as we said, money can be a taboo topic, even in a marriage, you know? Well, Stefan, this has been awesome. I hope you've had some fun today. I know I have. So yeah, thank you. We just want to thank everyone for listening. Hopefully you got something out of our session today as we talked about the challenges that couples face, some of the common themes we have, a little bit of insight into what it looks like when we meet with couples together and when we meet with them as individuals. And it's been a really, really fun conversation for us to have because I know we've both been picking up on little tidbits here and there. And we both love the challenge. I love the challenge of trying to be those flies on the wall in a relationship and to just give them the space to work things out. I hope our clients know they're in a place that's judgment free, and we're just there to help facilitate them to have the best financial lives they can have.
Yes. No, I love it. Perfectly said. Thank you for joining me on this conversation. And to our listeners, wherever you listen to this from, please drop a like. Please, if you found any value in it, or you have some friends getting married soon, share this with them. We were just trying to help you guys and help navigate kind of the craziness of life and how money intertwines with it. So if you found any value in it, please please subscribe to our channel. And thank you for hearing us.
Bye-bye.